Hi guys, welcome back to another installation video brought to you by your friends at MTX Audio. Today we are going to walk you through installing one of our new Ride Command Thunder kits on this machine behind me. So stay tuned and we'll get started. Alright guys, today we're going to walk you through our Thunder Kit 2 for Ride Command vehicles, like this one I've got behind me, which is a 2020 Turbo S Dynamix Edition. You can see that the kit is pretty comprehensive, but it's actually really easy to install. It's going to come with all the harnesses you need, a 4-channel amplifier, its mounting bracket, RGB controls with remote control for the speakers, obviously the speaker enclosures, the mounting brackets, and all the hardware you need will also be included. First thing we need to do is get the hood off and start disassembling. The first thing we want to do when we get started is remove the hood of the vehicle. You do this by turning the 2 plastic claps, one on each side, and slide the hood back towards you. What this allows is access to the distribution block underneath the hood that we'll need later. Next, we're going to move to the center of the dash and remove the 2 plastic rivets that hold your upper pocket in. In order to take the dash off, it's 4 T40 Torx bolts, 2 on each side. Once you remove them, the rest of the dash just simply clips off by pulling up and out. Alright, now that we've got the hood and top of the dash removed, we got to go ahead and do our center console and seats. Now remember, if this were a 4-seater, we'd also have to remove the rear part of the center console to access the battery and run our wires. So let's go ahead and get started. To do this, we're going to release it from the rear using the factory clip, lean it slightly forward, and slide it back. To remove the center console, you're going to want to remove the 4 plastic clips, 2 in the back and 1 on each side in the front. You're also going to remove 3 T40 bolts. After you've got all your hardware removed, go ahead and lift the center console, feeding your boots down through the console. To remove the driver's side boot, you're going to need to release the wire tie and unclip the speed sensor control, and then feed that back up through the boot, releasing the center console completely. Go ahead and remove it from the vehicle. Alright, now that we've got the seats and center console out of the vehicle, we're going to go ahead and run our power wire. In this case, we're going to want to run it from the battery in the fuse holder area, up through the center of the vehicle, through the tunnel, out under the hood, which later will feed through the grommet into the vehicle. Make sure when you're doing this, you stay away from any moving parts and zip tie it along the way as you go. Now that we've got our power wires out underneath the hood, we're going to want to feed them into the vehicle. Choosing the smaller of the 2 grommets in the firewall, we're going to carefully feed them into the cabin of the vehicle. Alright, now that we've got our power wire ran, it's time to install our amplifier. Now you'll notice when you open your power wire box, you're going to see 3 metal brackets. Now in the THUNDER2 kit, since we're only installing the MUD 100.4, we're only going to be using the base kit for this install. So these 2 other parts, just set them aside, you're not going to need them. Alright, now we're ready to go ahead and install our amplifier onto our mounting plate. I want to give you a couple of hints on this though. This is going to hang underneath the steering column on the 2 holes furthest back against the firewall. This little notch should end up in the left front hand corner of the vehicle. Keep in mind, when you're doing this, this is upside down. So that means your amplifier is going to be hanging upside down. Now, we suggest When it's in the vehicle and mounted, it hangs just like this with your gains to the outside of the vehicle so that you can have access to them when it's already mounted. That way, you can do all your tweaking, you don't have to pull your amps out, it should be really easy. I'm gonna go ahead and get this mounted to the plate and show you what I'm talking about, and we'll go from there. To install your amplifier, you're gonna align it with your center 4 holes, and using the supplied 3mm bolts, go ahead and fasten it to the plate, snugging it up once you have every bolt in place. Before we install our amplifier, we want to do a quick setup on the crossovers and the gains. Let's set the front crossover at 80 Hz. Let's set the rear at high. Front gain, 5/8 to 3/4. Rear gain, 5/8 to 3/4. For prep of the vehicle for amplifier installation, we like to drop the fuse box. To do this, you're going to need to remove the 2 10mm bolts, one on either side of it, and pull it down towards the bottom of the steering column, towards the floor. Another thing that will help you is to pop the harness free from the steering column, as well as unplugging the speedometer and pulling them to the side. To install the amp rack, you're going to want to feed it up the firewall, wire end pointing towards the center of the vehicle. The indents in the top of the amp rack ears will lock into place in the 2 holes closest to the firewall. Once the amp rack is clipped into place, use the 2 5-inch 10mm bolts to secure it into place. With the amp rack now installed, we can go ahead and plug our speedo back in. And bolt our fuse block back in. All right, now we're ready to start our kick panel installation. The real cool thing about these is they come to you fully assembled. They're sealed, you'll never have to take your speaker out. The only thing you'll have to do is install the quick install bracket, just 3 bolts. We're gonna lock the kick panel into that, fold it up, put 1 more bolt in, and these are installed, they're done. So let's go ahead and start that process. To start the installation, we're going to remove 2 T40 Torx bolts and 1 13mm body bolt. Now that we've got the bolts removed, we're going to align our bracket with the holes that the bolts came out of and return all the hardware we just took out, locking the bracket into the vehicle. On the bottom of the speaker pod, you'll notice 2 slots that line up with the slots on the bracket. You're going to set that in place and lean it back towards the vehicle, putting your top bolt in to secure it. Once your pods are secure, go ahead and run your wires up to the center of the vehicle. Now that we've got one pod installed, go ahead and repeat the process on the other side. All right, now it's time to get audio to our amplifier. Now this particular vehicle utilizes the ride command system. The ride command is going to be your audio source. It has 3 separate outputs, labeled 1, 2, and 3, or front, rear, and subwoofer. The labels will be the same on our harness. Now in this case, we're not adding the other 2, but the plug harness already has them, so let's plug it in case you want to add some bass later or some rear speakers, your signal will be done. So let's go ahead and we'll move to the vehicle and I'll show you where to find these connections. Now the ride command plugs can be a little bit difficult to find, but I assure you they're in there. On the left-hand side from the outside of the vehicle or towards the glove box side of the vehicle, you will find 2 gray plugs labeled Amp 1 and Amp 2. That'll be your front and your rear outputs. On the steering column side of the vehicle, you will find your 3rd output labeled Amp 3. That will be your subwoofer output. Since the speakers included in this kit have RGB, we're going to need a way to control them. Now you may have noticed when you unpack the hardware from the speakers, there was a small pigtail with ring terminals and 2 small connectors. Well, included in your kit is your RGB controller with remote control. this will allow you to change the color, the patterns of the speakers while it's playing. First thing we're going to need to do is connect these wires using the solder and seal connections. Now, the way this works is heat will be applied, it'll melt the solder and then melt the coating, which will create a waterproof seal. All right, now that we've got the ring terminal attached to our RGB controller, we're going to plug it into the mating plug on our speaker output harness. Okay, now we've got that plugged in, we're ready for the next step. Start by plugging the two AMP1 connectors together. We're also going to plug AMP2 connectors together because that's where we're going to pull our turn-on power for our amplifier. Now we're going to connect the input harness to the input on the amplifier. Next, we're going to connect the remote. Now we're going to connect the power and ground. And before we plug in the speaker harness, we want to run the RGB ring terminals to out under the hood through the grommet. Once that's done, connect the output harness to the amplifier. Then, we plug the right kick panel in. Then the left kick panel. Now that we've got our harnesses connected, we can go ahead, go out under the hood and connect our ring terminals for our RGB controller. After that, we'll move to the battery, make our battery connections, and install a fuse. Once all that's done, we can go ahead and give this system a test. With all of our testing complete, we can go ahead and tie up our wires and reassemble the vehicle. All right, guys, we're all set with this machine. As you can see, it looks a lot more complicated than it actually is. But I want to let you know, if you have any questions or concerns or just need some answers, hit us up on Facebook or call our tech line. We'll be glad to walk you through any questions you have. With that being said, let's get out and hit some trails. See ya.